There have been few moments in history more shocking, more dramatic, brutal and influential as the assassination of Julius Caesar. He is often remembered as one of the most important historical figures in many millennia. And he was a military genius who expanded the Roman Empire. He ruled as a dictator and used his power to make a large amount of changes to the empire. But his death in 44 BCE marked the end not just of life of one of Rome's greatest leaders, but the collapse of the Roman Republic. After his death, Caesar was allegedly cremated in the Roman Forum. However, his ashes were interred at a site where a temple named after him was later built in his honour. Today, this burial location can still be seen, and his grave can be too, and it has allegedly been opened a number of times over the years. But what's the truth about this? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. To understand why Julius Caesar was killed, we need to look at the man himself. Gaius Julius Caesar was born in 100 BCE into a patrician family, though not one of the wealthiest. His rise to prominence came through a mixture of military skill, political manoeuvring, and sheer determination. By the 60s BCE, Caesar had already made a name for himself in Roman politics. He gained popularity with the common people, the populares, by supporting laws that helped the poor. His greatest leap forward, however, came from military success. As governor of Gaul, he launched campaigns that lasted nearly a decade and expanded Roman territory all the way to the English Channel. His conquest of Gaul brought him enormous wealth, prestige, and the loyalty of hardened legions. But this success made him enemies. The Roman Senate, dominated by conservative aristocrats, the optimates, grew fearful of his growing power. His greatest rival, Pompey the Great, once his ally, turned against him. In 49 BCE, Caesar famously crossed the Rubicon River with his army, declaring war on the Senate and Pompey. Civil war erupted, and Caesar emerged victorious. By 46 BCE, he was master of Rome. The Senate showered him with titles and honours, making him dictator for 10 years, then dictator for life in 44 BCE. And for some Romans, this was too much. Dictatorship was meant to be temporary, only used in emergencies. To many senators, Caesar looked less like a republican leader and more like a king. Rome had a deep hatred of monarchy. The Republic had been founded centuries earlier, in 509 BCE, after the last king, Tarquin the Proud, was overthrown. From then on, the Romans prided themselves on their system of elected magistrates and checks on power. Caesar, however, seemed to be eroding these traditions. He filled the Senate with his supporters, ignored old customs, and made decisions without consultation. He placed his own portrait on coins, something previously reserved for gods. Statues of him were erected, and rumours spread that he intended to crown himself king. In February of 44 BCE, during the festival of Lupercari, Mark Antony publicly offered him a crown. Caesar refused, but the incident fueled suspicion. To his enemies, Caesar had already crossed the line from leader to tyrant. A group of senators decided that Caesar had to die. They called themselves the liberators, or the liberators. Their aim was to save the Republic from one-man rule. At the heart of the conspiracy was Gaius Cassius Longinus, a bitter enemy of Caesar, and Marcus Junius Brutus, whose family history was tied to the Republic's founding. Brutus's ancestors, Lucius Junius Brutus, had helped overthrow Rome's last king. For many, Brutus symbolised the Republic itself. Plutarch, the Greek historian, wrote that the conspirators believed that Brutus's involvement would give their cause moral legitimacy. Without him, it might look like a petty act of jealousy. With him, it could be seen as an act of patriotism. In all, around 60 men are thought to have joined the plot. They met in secret, whispering in corners and avoiding suspicion, but it was risky. Caesar had loyal soldiers and Rome was filled with spies. If the conspiracy failed, their lives would be forfeit. The date was set, the Ides of March, the 15th of March, 44 BCE. On that day, the Senate was due to meet in the Theatre of Pompey, a temporary location since the usual Senate house was under renovation. According to ancient writers, Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, had a terrible dream the night before, foreseeing his death. She begged him not to go, and Caesar himself reportedly felt uneasy. Rumours say a soothsayer had warned him to beware the Ides of March, but Caesar, dismissing these omens, went to the Senate regardless. As he entered the hall, the conspirators surrounded him. At first they approached him with petitions. Then suddenly one of them, Tilius Cimber, grabbed Caesar's toga as if it belonged for mercy. This was the signal. Publius Siscar struck first, stabbing Caesar in the neck. Shocked, Caesar fought back, but soon the others joined in. Daggers flashed from all sides, and ancient accounts differ on the number of wounds. Some say 23. As the dictator fell, he is said to have seen Brutus among the attackers. The famous phrase, et tu, Brute, and you, Brutus, comes from Shakespeare's play, not from the ancient sources. But both Plutarch and Suetonius record that Caesar covered his face with his toga when he saw Brutus, as if to die with dignity. Moments later, Julius Caesar collapsed at the base of the Pompey statue, the very man he had once defeated in civil war. At first, the assassins believed they had restored freedom. They rushed out of the Senate house shouting liberty, freedom for Rome, expecting the people to cheer, but the reaction was not what they had hoped. The Roman crowd was confused and fearful. Caesar had been popular with the common people. He'd given them land, cancelled debts, and provided games and festivals. To many Romans he was not a tyrant but a champion. Mark Antony, Caesar's ally and loyal supporter, seized the moment. At Caesar's funeral, he delivered a passionate speech, holding up Caesar's blood-stained cloak and pointing to the wounds. He read Caesar's will, which left money and gifts to the Roman people, and fury erupted. Riots broke out in the streets, and the conspirators were forced to flee. According to some historians, the funeral of Julius Caesar was rather dramatic. It was a scene of great change in which Mark Antony spoke about a large amount of decisions he was now going to make. In accordance with the tradition of the time, the body of Caesar was cremated at the Forum, and then a temple was later built. Still today, the temple of the divine Caesar exists and can be visited, and this was built over the site where the body was burnt. There's no indication that Caesar's ashes rested in the temple at the Forum, and this was because the temple was built many years later and afterwards. But it was also the time where it was forbidden to bury the dead within the city of Rome. If this had been waived and allowed, then there would have been writings and chronicles documenting this. So if Caesar's ashes were not buried at the temple at the Forum, where were they interred? Now, according to ancient historian Suetonius, he stated, the bier, as in the hearse or funeral cortege, on the rostra was carried down into the Forum by magistrates and ex-magistrates, and while some were urging that it be burnt in the temple of Jupiter, on the Capitol, and others in the hall of Pompey, on a sudden 2 beings with swords by their sides and brandishing a pair of darts set fire to it with blazing torches, and at once the throngs of bystanders helped upon it to dry branches, the judgment seats which the benches and whatever else could serve as an offering. So there was a belief that he was burnt in the temple, on the Capitoline Hill, and possibly even the Curia in Pompeii, where he was murdered. But Suetonius claims that Caesar was originally meant to be cremated in the fields of Mars, where a funeral pyre was prepared. But the dictator did not have time to be moved there, and as the funeral events got out of hand, a new pyre at the Forum was probably made, and that was where he was burned. There is a grave today inside the Temple of Caesar, as mentioned in Rome, and this is located in the former site of the temple built in the Roman Forum. This is particularly a brick pile and a pile of rubble, and today people still leave flowers and memorials to the former Roman ruler. But the important thing is that He was burnt there, and there was no specific grave or tomb, but the grave site marks that of the temple, and it is the ruins of the former temple rather than the actual grave. But today many people consider this to be the final resting place of Julius Caesar. But it's not true, meaning that today thousands each year are in a sense tricked into believing that the remains of the emperor still remain. The story of Julius Caesar's assassination is one of betrayal and misplaced hope. Caesar's rise made him one of the most powerful men in history, but his ambition alarmed those who clung to republican ideals. On the Ides of March, a group of senators struck him down, believing they were saving Rome, and instead they set in motion the events that destroyed the Republic forever. In the end, Caesar's death was not just the fall of a man, it was the fall of a system. The Republic that Brutus and Cassius hoped to defend could not survive the very violence they used to protect it. The world changed that day, in the March of 44 BCE, and the shadow of Julius Caesar has never faded. Thank you for watching, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching.